Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Bearable Bull here. And I got this aggressively average content for you today in what is one of the most important interviews I've ever done. Today, I'm presenting to all of you my interview with Hugo Philion, CEO of Flare Networks. And Flare Networks will be one of the greatest opportunities the XRP community will ever have been presented. It's moments like this, while we're getting sued by the SEC and the crypto prices are down, that the real savages survive, thrive, and educate themselves on how to be better prepared and earn more money for when the technology is there and ready to go live. Ladies and gentlemen, all your most asked questions were answered, and some. And I really think after this interview said and done, you'll leave feeling like you really understand what's going on and why the process for Flare Network and Spark tokens launching took as long as it did. A lot of people may or may not have been frustrated due to the delays over the past year and this observation period. But trust me when I tell you it's well worth the wait. They're prioritizing security. They're ensuring everything is decentralized upon this launch. And with exchanges going bankrupt and halting trading and withdrawals left and right, they're looking to make updates to ensure that people get their tokens. Flare Network is looking to do it right from the beginning. And that's why I'm so excited to have been lucky enough to own XRP at the time of the snapshot so I can receive my airdrop. This quite literally is the mother of all airdrops in crypto history, ladies and gentlemen, and do not forget it. I hope you enjoy this interview. And without further ado, I present to all of you Hugo Philion. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you guys are from across the world. I'm genuinely humbled to be here with the CEO of Flare, Hugo Philion, in front of me. Hugo, I would love, and the XRP community would love if you could introduce yourself very quickly for those of you that may not know you yet.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm Hugo Philion, co-founder of Flare. Flare is a new layer one blockchain launching this month.
Very nice, very nice. And can you just go a little further into what exactly the Flare network is and what you guys are setting out to do in the crypto space?
Absolutely. So Flare's a layer one chain. It's a layer one EVM chain. And that means that it has the Ethereum virtual machine integrated into it. What that ultimately means is that it has smart contracts with Solidity. But beyond that, as there are quite a few layer one EVM chains, Flare has two core protocols integrated directly into the network. The first is a price oracle that many of the community know and use on our CanaryNet Songbird called the Flare Time Series Oracle. This is essentially a price oracle that's based on proof of stake. Relative to other price oracles in the industry, it's quite highly decentralized. At the moment on Songbird, there's about 100 or close to 100 data providers. And we're hoping to be able to scale that number of data providers and the amount of data that is provided into the thousands of providers and potentially thousands of different data series. So it has this unique price oracle embedded into it, which is a very interesting thing for a layer one chain to have. And then the second really important aspect of what we're building with Flare is what we call the state connector. It is, to our knowledge, the fastest and most secure way for a blockchain to understand the state of another blockchain, or even potentially the state of another deterministic system through an API. So for instance, a web API. And this allows Flare to understand prices from outside of the network, but also what has happened on, say, other blockchains. And this allows smart contracts to be built on Flare that do things with those prices and those events. And really what that, where Flare is focusing on is sort of four key areas. So the first is bridging, and you may know about something called the F-assets. which is a quasi-synthetic bridging protocol for non-smart contract platform tokens, such as Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, XRP, Stellar. And then the second bridging protocol is what we call layer cake. It's for smart contract-based assets, both fungible tokens and potentially non-fungible tokens.
Okay.
And the layer cake uses Flare to create a multilateral bridging solution for the entire industry, potentially for the entire industry. So you can bridge from any chain to any other chain, any smart contract chain to any other smart contract chain through the layer cake system, using layer cake to ensure those bridging events. And we can dig into that a little later, if you don't mind.
Please.
So the first element is bridging. Second element is Web3 to Web3 composability and relay. You can build a smart contract on Flare that can take inputs from any chain, and that through the state connector. And that lets you do very interesting things. The other thing you can do is you can relay information between chains using Flare. And potentially you can ensure that relay as well on Flare, because Flare can determine whether the information from the relay has been delivered successfully, and were there collateral put against that relay contract, it could pay out in the event that the relay has become malicious or failed to put the correct data on. So bridging Web3 composability, something we call Web2 to Web3 composability, which is where the state connector can connect to external APIs in Web2 to receive events. We have a very exciting announcement of a product that someone's building coming out on that soon. I won't cover it here, but to give you an example of where that can be interesting, let's say you make a tweet on Twitter as part of, say, some influencer campaign. It's just an example. And let's say it gets 500 retweets. Well, as an influencer, you may get, say, paid out from a smart contract once those 500 retweets have happened. That's not something I necessarily think will happen, but it's just an example of the kind of functionality that Flare can be used for. To go further, you could use the same functionality in order to do things on the result of, say, a game on an API from something like Steam. So that's bridging, Web3 composability, Web2 to Web3 composability. And then the last element, which we think is really interesting, is Flare as a constellation of multiple different Flare chains. So when we launch, we'll have Songbird and we'll have Flare. Songbird, as many people know, is our canary net. It's a main net in its own right. And then Flare is our core main net. Now, Songbird has its roles, and we can cover what those roles are shortly. And Flare is obviously the main network. But what those two networks can have, because both of them have the state connector on them, and what the state connector is doing is it can take events that have happened on each chain and confirm them on each chain. So Flare can confirm an event that has happened on Songbird on Flare, and Songbird can confirm an event that has happened on Flare on Songbird. And that gives you a really nice, robust, and secure way to do interoperability between those two networks, both in state. And what I mean by state is an application on Flare can use a piece of information from Songbird. Let's say you've moved some tokens from one address to another address. So the application can do something with that on Flare, or with tokens. So you can put your tokens in Songbird on a locking contract. So locked on Songbird, Flare can observe they're locked, and it can issue those tokens on Flare. And then Songbird can watch when those tokens come back to the contract, and it can reissue them back to the rightful owner when that event happens. So this is like a multi-network system. And this is very interesting because it allows the potential constellation of different Flare chains, both for us to scale horizontally, so distribute essentially computation across different blockchains, Flare-based blockchains, but also to have different virtual machines and application-specific blockchains. And that's where I think the real use case will be, because I think singular blockchains are very unlikely to reach sufficient scaling limits to handle the potential demand under mass adoption.
Yes.
And so the way we see the world unfolding is many different application-specific blockchains. So a blockchain for, say, a really successful game like, let's say, Fortnite. Again, not saying we're in bed with Fortnite, just saying, you know, a very specific, you know, application. Maybe a banking application, maybe another application, and having essentially interoperability, perfect, strong and robust interoperability between these chains is something Flare can enable if you're running a Flare-based chain. And so we think that the potential long-term future for Flare is as a multi-net ecosystem, and it would be quite a desirable model for a multi-net ecosystem versus some of the other models that are out there, simply because the state connector provides the blockchain itself what we think is the most robust and the fastest way to understand what has happened on another blockchain.
Very nice. And for all of you at home, that's extremely important, and I don't want that to go over your guys' head. Flare, I think you guys have been famous for going for saying things like connect everything and unlocking the value, right? Those two phrases are very important to me because I see the interoperability aspect of crypto in the future being the most important thing. We don't need these siloed systems. We need everything to work together. I often say that, you know, cryptos and companies that aim to work together as opposed to competing with each other, that is when we will have the tipping point, if you will, right? So that's very important to me.
Absolutely. So one shouldn't think of Flare as a single thing. It's a layer one where people want to use it as a layer one. So for instance, the F-assets, where you mint FBTC and FXRP and F whatever else onto Flare, then it's a really good layer one for those F-assets. It's a really good place to use them in DeFi. But then for things like Relay or Layer Cake smart contract bridging, it's a utility that allows those kind of systems to be better. So for instance, if you look at Layer Cake bridging, it's not necessary that Layer Cake has to be from Ethereum to Flare. And that's, you know, we're building Layer Cake as a way to expand Flare as a layer one. I mean, obviously, we certainly wouldn't be unhappy if people bridged from some chain onto Flare to use the layer one tokens. But equally, being able to use Layer Cake just to bridge between any different chain is, to my mind, extremely useful. And so, and it all secured by Flare. So in some ways, you can think of Flare as a layer one. In some ways, you can think of Flare as almost a unique interoperability-based blockchain in order to enable interoperability across many different chains. It really, what it's actually doing, and we dig down to this and when we go into Layer Cake, is what it's actually doing is it's trying to de-risk the user experience, both from, say, bridging and from Relay. So in bridging, you know, it's quite a, we've seen a lot of issues in bridging recently. You know, there's been more than $1.5 billion of losses in bridging in the last year. And what we're trying to do with Layer Cake is to provide essentially a way for the risk to the user to be moved away from the user to people who are better able to bear it. So it acts like insurance in that way. And that the reason we think that's important is, firstly, we don't think there are very good technical only solutions to getting rid of the risk. If there were, people would have created them. But we do think that you have to get rid of the risk to the user if you want to scale blockchain in the long term. And because, you know, I often say to people, well, imagine if, you know, if every time you sent an email, there was a potential that you could lose your house. Would email have become a popular utility across the world? And I think no is the answer there. So we kind of have the same idea about cross-chain, multi-chain, which is it is the future. It has to be the future because there can't be one chain that can provide everything for everyone. But the only way it's the future is if we de-risk it for the user.
Yes.
And importantly, so what you can think of in Flare in that de-risking area is kind of like an insurance market. It understands the state of other chains. So, and in order to understand the state of other chains, it has this protocol called the state connector.
Mm-hmm.
But in understanding the state of other chains, it can essentially dictate or control actions of people on different chains, because it can sanction them. And that's where things like insurance and insured relays come in. So I know about my bridging. I know that user A wanted to move 10 ETH from Ethereum to some Cosmos chain, let's say, but they never got that 10 ETH. And that's because the people running the bridge, the entities that were running the bridge, didn't finalize the transaction, or they got hacked, let's say. And what we do is we take collateral against those bridging events, and we observe whether the transaction has been completed. And if it hasn't, we can then recapitalize the bridge. So Flare can be thought of not only as a layer one, but also as a utility kind of insurance market, really a risk mediation layer for the blockchain industry.
And for those of you that are at home listening, don't let that one go over your heads. That is going to be so important for the future of crypto, because bridges have notoriously been a vulnerability for this space because of that concentration of risk, right? So if Flare can kind of act as that insurance, that's priceless, right? That's absolutely priceless. So I'm really glad that you went to that.
It's not just bridging. So bridging is useful to people, but so is the relay of data between chains. And at the moment, the relay of data between chains is pretty centralized. And the problem with the centralization of that is that gives you a lot of risk embedded in the people or the entities that are doing that relay.
Yes.
And again, we think about the same model is, it's very, very hard to decentralize that model. There aren't particularly good ways to do it such that it's truly trustless. So we think put insurance against it and use Flare as that insurance layer, such that faulty data can pay out on Flare when that event happens, and that's kind of our mentality. So Flare becomes a layer of which can sit in the middle of everything and basically cover financially the risks that people are taking in the cross-chain space.
Excellent. Something I do want to touch on that you mentioned earlier is Songbird. Songbird is one of my personal favorite developments you guys have come up with. I thought it was genius to have this canary network. And just to have this as, I've heard the phrase, you guys can fail gracefully on Songbird, right? So that's excellent. What have you seen or learned from having Songbird live, and what do you see the future of Songbird being?
There's so much to unpack there. So yeah, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about the FTSO. It's been live since September. So that's, for those listening that don't know what that is, that's the Flare time series Oracle. It's been live since September 2021. So we've got a lot of data on it. We've learned about sort of the incentives there. We've learned about the community engagement. We've learned about the quality of prices. Thankfully, the quality of prices has been extremely good relative to other oracles. And essentially, it's inspiring us as a team we'll be coming out with updates to the FTSO at some point in the future. No time frame. It works really well currently, but there's always ways we can make it better. So for instance, one of the first things that will happen on, say, for instance, on Flare, is that rather than having a 10% voting power cap for each FTSO, it'll be 2.5%. And so that's, that means it'll be, there needs to be essentially more FTSOs, more decentralization, perhaps a wider rewarded set, so more FTSOs being rewarded. So, yeah, we're constantly observing, looking, thinking about what were our assumptions when we designed these systems, how are they actually working in reality? Are there things we can do to make it better? So that we have lots of thoughts there. We're just working through them. And then, so you then ask, what is the long-term point of Songbird? Well, obviously the initial long-term point of Songbird, as stated, was to give people a network to test on, but also a network, so a network for people to integrate with these protocols such that they can learn without losing their flair. That was the first thing, but also for us to learn, and then for us to upgrade. So when assuming we make a change to the FTSO, a governance-led change to the FTSO, assuming we propose that and it gets accepted on Songbird, we would test that change on the FTSO on Songbird, and that would inform whether we then progress that to Flare. So that is, we've always said that Songbird is a long-term testing test bed for our protocols, and it remains as such. And then I think I've mentioned to the community a couple of times that I want to make Songbird the initiation of community governance. And the way I think about that, I'm going to be releasing a proposal soon. But again, we're in the middle of launching the blockchain, so not sure how soon it'll be. But the way I think about that is that, the community may make governance proposals around Flare. They may say, oh, we want to change the interest rate, or we want to change how much the incentive pool is paying out, or we want to add this asset as an F asset, or we want to add this this particular chain as a layer cake chain. And the way we see these proposals working is that, there's a limit to how much can be done in any particular period, and there's a limit to how much should be done in any particular period. So it's important to have a filtration mechanism for how these proposals get to being essentially voted on. And one of the core and I think useful use cases for Songbird is to allow, let's say there's a period quarterly, whereby proposals are put into the batch of proposals in that quarter, and then people stake to those proposals. Whilst they're staked to those proposals, the value of Songbird that is in those proposal contracts can be delegated to FTSOs. Let's think of each contract potentially as a DAO, whereby all of the people that are staked to those contracts are able to control who they're delegating to through a DAO-based structure. And then, so they stake. The proposal contract is earning the FTSO return. They're staked for a minimum of, say, a year. And in that quarter, whichever proposal wins the most staking, then goes to a vote on Flare, where the Flare holders vote on it. The foundation will be involved by giving an opinion on the proposal that wins on Songbird. You'll give an opinion, and then people can vote on it. But then you've got the proposals on Songbird, and they're locked for a year. But the winning proposal perhaps gets a large percentage of all of the FTSO earnings from the rest of the proposals that didn't win. So there is a negative for staking to a non-winning proposal, and that negative is not earning the FTSO reward. But there is a positive incentive for staking to a winning governance proposal, and that is receiving the FTSO reward from the other proposals that didn't win. So there's no loss of assets at the core level. So you're not losing. If you stake one Songbird, you will get one Songbird back after a year. You just don't get your inflation. You don't get your interest on the FTSO. And so I think that's a useful mechanism. There are also potential other ways that proposals can generate earnings. So if it's, say, for instance, adding a new asset through F-assets or through the layer cake bridge, a proposal can potentially say we want to add asset X. Asset X would be included from the earnings of incentive pool that come through layer cake and come through the F-assets. And we would like to take 5% of the earnings that attribute to asset X, for instance. You know, so there's lots of ways I think about the governance role of Songbird. And as I said, I'll be putting out a proposal when I get time to clean it up and really make sure that it's fit for people to think about and vote on. And then the last thing, as I think I said earlier, with regards to Songbird, is that it's potentially the first overflow computation network for Flare. So the first scaling network. So because Flare has the state connector on it and Songbird has the state connector on it, and they can both point at each other, then tokens can potentially flow from Songbird to Flare and from Flare to Songbird. But also information can flow. So you can have interoperability on Songbird with apps on Flare, such that I have, let's say, a DeFi app on Songbird that is doing some composable element with another DeFi app on Flare. And now I've got two computation networks. So if the price of computation on Flare becomes expensive, because it scales very quickly and there's a large amount of applications that are built, then you can start adding additional computation to Songbird. And like I said, we can have a constellation of these networks. So we can essentially distribute compute over lots of different blockchains.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that's going to be very important. Very important. Something that I do want to touch on, and this is a piece of information that's in high demand, given that July 4th, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the official audit of token distribution took place, right? So personally speaking, I'm extremely excited for getting my Spark tokens, but a lot of people don't understand what's going on at the moment, right? There's some people that have told me, "Oh, Bull, I haven't received my Spark yet," and
Yep.
I definitely understand. So something.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. So we passed the network audit. So that's the audit of the core technology of Flare. And that was with Trail of Bits. And we made a few, I suppose, relatively late-term code edits to the way the tokens are distributed and things. And in order to safely put those on the network at launch, Flare. So don't forget, this is pretty much the largest distribution of tokens taking place for a very, very long time. You know, we're not just distributing to a few people, predominantly people that are maybe inside investors. We're distributing to potentially, you know, I don't know what the number is, but we have 350,000 wallets on Songbird itself, or addresses, more than 350,000. And more than 100 of those addresses belong to exchanges. And I'm not certain how many people there are behind those exchanges, meaning, you know, people will receive the Flare token. But one could estimate it's definitely, if you think for every self-custody person, there's probably between 10 and 20 non-self-custody people. So that, and we have 350,000 addresses, then you think that there may be between, you know, 3.5 and 7 million potential token holders. So it's potentially a really large distribution. And so what we as a team, obviously, if we screw up the distribution or in any way, have an error, we're kind of stuck with it. We're in trouble. And so we have been very, very cautious. And so we obviously sent the distribution code to auditors. That started on the 4th and should finish on Friday, with a report potentially next week sometime. And so that means, and that's why we've specified that we should be able to launch from the 11th. Can't guarantee the 11th, need to know what the result of that report is. But we've said, we know that when we're getting the report back, and so we can distribute from the 11th.
And something I'm also curious to know about is this observation period, right? What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so we've got to start a blockchain. We've got to start a blockchain that is potentially the largest distribution in a very long time. And we're not a pure proof of stake chain. So you don't just stake your tokens to a validator, which then does that, takes over the validation. We base our validation on the FTSO data providers. And so we have to have a period by which the FTSO data providers can come onto the chain, can start providing data, and that data can then be used to give those data providers power in the network. So as they get power, they're essentially we're essentially winding down our validators, the Flare Foundation's validators.
Just so that everyone at home knows, Hugo, what exactly is this observation period?
Absolutely. So as I said, Flare is a very large distribution. We want to make sure that that distribution is done by a decentralized network, such that when the token is distributed to the public and exchanges can list it, that the network is being run by decentralized validation, not by the foundation. Yes. And we're not a pure proof of stake network, so you don't just stake to a validator. The way our network operates is that the validators come from the FTSOs. So FTSOs have the right to run a validator, and their validator power relates both to their delegation and to the performance of their prices, so how frequently they're getting rewarded. And so we need this period of time to onboard the FTSOs, to have some data from the FTSOs based on, we'll be delegating to them to start with, but their pricing will be their own. And so this allows us to, essentially the network starts with the foundation running all the validators. And then during the observation period, we move from the network, from the foundation running the validators, to essentially the FTSOs running the validators. At the point where the network is no longer run by the foundation, we can then come out of observation period, and we can then do the public distribution. What we didn't want to do, and this is important for people to understand, was we didn't want the foundation to be in control of the network at the point of distribution, because if anything went wrong with our validators, the whole network could be taken down. And the whole point of a decentralized network is that it's robust and secure because it has distributed validation, or at least one of the points, not the whole point, but a very large point of having a decentralized network is that it's not dependent on one entity.
Excellent. And Hugo, I'm gonna have to stop you there, because me personally, this is where I have to kind of check some people, right? Because there's a lot of comments and a lot of people echoing, I just want my Spark token. Yeah, no, you've seen the comments. And to me, I just find that to be so silly. XRP holders, we've been blessed with the opportunity to be able to receive your creation for free, right? All we've done is hold XRP, and to me, what I need to let people know is that we have to sit back and watch the builders build, because you are in my opinion, you guys are about to pull off one of the most unique things that the crypto space has ever seen. I feel like um, you've solved the decentralization issue, right? And you've also solved potentially the how would you call it, the securities issue, right? I don't want to get into the legal or regulatory side because I don't know, but if this is going to be as decentralized from inception as I think it is, then that's a very big problem that's solved from day one. Never gonna shut off. We're not Solana here. We're not gonna pause the blockchain. So it's very important that people understand you guys are doing it right. It's about the security. It's about the health of the technology, and we're in a very fortunate position that we have you guys at the helm, making sure that things run smoothly and take all the time you need, because the people that are going to participate in the network and are really looking to build, we're patient and we see what you're doing and we're very grateful for it, right? I have
Um,
this.
I think, yeah, I mean, in addition to hopefully being, highly decentralized and having an extremely wide token distribution,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of things have changed about the Flare project
Mhm.
since we kind of put the white paper out in 2020. When we put that white paper out, we were almost a very simple project that was just trying to provide a smart contract platform for some non-smart contract tokens.
Mhm.
We've expanded that vision very dramatically, which I hope I covered in the earlier part of the interview, but into those 4 pillars of bridging,
Yes.
composability and relay, Web 2 to Web 3 composability, and then constellation of multi-chains.
Yes.
This has been a massive engineering project for
Mhm.
us to expand that use. And so it has taken us longer. It's also meant we've had to do a lot more audits, and audits take a very long time to schedule. If you try to schedule an audit now, you'll probably get capacity in about 9 to 10 months for say a network audit with a very reliable entity. So it's not like we can just do our work and then just deliver it. We have to go, we have to go to external providers to check our work, to see if there are errors. We're doing this as as by the book as we can, as safely as we can.
Mhm.
There may well be things that need to change over time. But we really we put safety, we put reliability ahead of anything else, and that's sort of our motto. And I get the community is frustrated. I gave dates, which I should never have given dates for.
Mhm.
But those were our best estimates at the time. They were wrong. We kind of believe in being, not kind of, we definitely believe in being, transparent. So we gave dates. Those were our estimates. They were wrong. We gave new dates. Those are also our estimates. Sure, people can be frustrated by that, but we're always going to say what we're thinking.
Mhm. And I think the people that really know what's going on, we're pretty forgiving. So no worries, man. Take your time. It's what's most important is that it gets launched right. So very excited, my friend, without a doubt. Um,
Thank you.
some things that I'm personally very curious about, and this is a very greedy question for me, is do current negative crypto market conditions have any effect on Flare launching? Is there or do you think that it would be better for the overall health of the network to launch when prices are maybe higher? There's not exchanges going bankrupt the left and right and liquidations happening everywhere.
I've got a couple of things to say on that. I think I can deal with the exchange question in a minute, because it's a really
Sure.
big question for the community.
Yeah.
But I think with regards to the price, I mean, in terms of our team, we don't care. we're here for the long term. You know, we've been working on this for a very long time.
Mhm.
Most of us just really love what we're building.
Yes.
We're not particularly, you know, obviously we want the project to be extremely successful for the
Mhm.
community, for the project, more for the vision that we think that it's useful. We think it solves problems in crypto that that by solving those problems, it creates a better experience in crypto for everyone, and
Mhm.
therefore expands the use of crypto. And actually, I'm rather thankful to be launching now. A
Yes.
couple of reasons. One, I think, is less incentive just for people to take profits and go elsewhere.
Hmm.
Two, it means that there's, you know, less fanfare, immediate fanfare followed by potentially, you know, a negative scenario where, you know, let's say you launch at an extremely high price, and then the price comes off hard. Then, you know, do you get, you know, do people kind of get annoyed about that? Do people kind of say, oh, well, it's just a, you know, flash in the pan, it's not real? I mean, we've seen some very big networks like that have happened.
Mhm.
I'd rather launch quietly and build the utility of Flare based on the utility that we're offering,
Mhm.
based on the products that can be built on Flare. And don't forget, it's not just us that can build these interoperability products. Of
Mhm.
course, we have our own ideas, such as Layer Cake, such as relays, but anyone can use Flare to build something that is referencing an external system. And so, you know, part of our work is going to be telling people about how to do that, educating them on how to do that. And
Mhm.
I think, you know, being able to launch during this environment where actually utility is what is needed,
Yeah.
rather than, you know, very short term schemes to make large amounts of money, which is what a lot of the bull market was about. Not naming names, but we all know which ones.
Yeah.
I want to see the next bull market. I want to see it to be sustainable. I want it to be based on mass adoption or more adoption, at least.
Mhm.
That's what we're building Flare for. So yeah, I can care less about the price of these assets, to be honest with you. I get
Excellent.
that everyone in this industry sees himself as an investor. I don't see myself as a citizen of an alternate way of doing things.
Nice.
And, you know, if you're constantly rebasing yourself into dollars, rather than embracing this as a different way of doing things and a potential alternative future, then I think you've got the wrong mindset. I appreciate that that is most people's mindset, but it's not mine.
Yes. And I think that's the quote of the interview right there. A different way of doing things as opposed to an investor, right? Something I'll ask on top of that, kind of along those lines, is the exchanges, right? You know, a lot
Oh,
of
yeah, I was going to cover the exchanges. Okay, so all the
yeah.
exchanges are, you know, everyone's terrified about them, and for good reason. Thankfully, the largest exchanges will probably be okay.
Mhm.
Hopefully, most of them will be okay for the next couple of months whilst we distribute the token. Now, I'm putting in a governance proposal that changes the way the token is distributed so that it's distributed through the FTSO, so that you get your initial 15% and the rest is distributed through the FTSO. Governance proposal will be out very soon. One of the core ideas behind that proposal is it means that we don't have to distribute over 3 years directly to exchanges, because obviously every additional month is another month that an exchange can go bankrupt.
Mhm.
And so we hope that most of the exchanges will still be around by the time we do the initial distribution. And then once you get those tokens, that you're then safe. You get the tokens from the exchange, you're safe. You can then delegate them on the FTSO to receive the rest of the distribution.
Nice.
That solves the 3-year problem with distributing directly to exchanges, and that changes the risk dynamic. It basically takes the risk away from the exchange going bankrupt. So yeah, that proposal is really important. I hope it'll be adopted. Expect it will. Yeah, that'll be out very soon.
Very nice. Excellent. Now, what I do have to say, kind of along those lines, is for those of you watching at home, I've always stressed self custody, and now you understand why, right? We have exchanges going bankrupt left and right, and it's kind of
Well, the bulk of the distribution is
uh,
to exchanges.
yep. And it's frustrating to see because people are nervous, but that's the risk you take with when you put things
Yeah.
on an exchange. So
Yeah. Well, like I said, the idea behind the proposal is to distribute directly through the network, such that you get the 15% through your exchange, and then the rest is distributed through the network. Up to you whether you decide to receive it through the network. Obviously, if you don't, you won't get it. But you need to engage with the network to receive the rest.
And that's an important proposal. I pray that it passes. Thank you for doing that as well. Let me see. Let me see. Um, just the final point on those exchanges. There are some exchanges that have not distributed Songbird at all. Do you think that they will eventually?
I do think many will eventually.
Okay.
I don't have a time frame for that. I don't have we don't have any further information on that. But the more successful Flare is, the more likely that they will distribute Songbird.
Excellent, excellent. So
and just to be clear, they never signed up to distribute Songbird. So the ones that did distribute Songbird did it because they like what we're doing. And importantly, one of the tier 1 exchanges distributed Songbird. So, probably one of the, at least from our perspective, one of the exchanges with one of the best technical teams that I've ever come across. And I won't name which one it is, but distributed Songbird, and that was really encouraging to us because to get that kind of respect from such a high-profile exchange for a canary net is a really big deal.
I think I could guess which one, but I'm not gonna do it here. I won't do it. But that's excellent. Yep, I can only imagine. Let me see. Let me see. I have quite a few more questions. This is a marathon, my friend. This is a marathon.
Cool. I've got another hour.
Excellent, excellent. How do you view the future of XRP, post clarity, and flared networks kind of working in harmony?
Sure. So I think post clarity, depends which way clarity goes.
Let's say best case scenario.
I suspect it goes best case scenario. Just that's my hunch, and I very much hope so. And then I think we've obviously articulated two very distinct things with regards to XRP. The first is the XRP, which is allowing you to use your XRP on a layer 1 smart contract platform, Flare. Layer Cake as a bridging protocol will then let you bridge that FXRP to any blockchain that Layer Cake is connected to, which is quite exciting. And it'll let you bridge that with insurance, which no one else offers, which is kind of key from our perspective. And when I say no one else offers it, I mean no one else offers proper decentralized insurance that is managed by a blockchain. There may be some bridges with insurance from a centralized counterparty, but that's not decentralized. And so we let you, as things spin up, you'll be able to use FXRP on Flare. You'll be able to earn the incentive reward holding FXRP on Flare. You'll then be able to take that incentive reward and delegate it to the FTSO, which will earn you additional tokens. And so that's the first area. Then the second area is, we've proposed, and Probity started building, and I'm not sure where they're going with their product, but a bridge back to XRP. We proposed essentially a way to issue assets from Flare, so decentralized assets, onto the XRP ledger that retains trustlessness. So at the moment, with issued assets on XRP ledger, let's say an asset that represents $1, that's being issued by a centralized counterparty. You could potentially create a stable dollar on Flare from collateralized Flare or collateralized F-assets or collateralized layer cake assets, and then issue that stable dollar onto the XRP ledger. And I think this gets exciting now that David Schwartz has put forward a new design for an AMM directly on the XRP ledger, I believe, because I think that AMM will need a decentralized stable token in order to give it liquidity. Sure, you could use a centralized stable token, but it's nice to have a decentralized one as well. And so really the future of XRP and Flare is use XRP on Flare as FXRP, and then potentially bridge back with whatever assets you like issued in a trustless manner onto the XRP ledger.
Excellent. And for us, the retail investor, the XRP holder, what are the incentives and also risks of actually participating on Flare, maybe bringing XRP on to convert it to FXRP?
Yeah. Very clearly, the risks of FXRP is that the value of the collateral that is securing the F-asset protocol falls below 1-to-1. So we hold we specify the collateral rate at 2.5 times what is being issued. And as the price of the assets that are used as collateral, so principally Flare, but we're looking to make the F-asset protocol multi-collateral through layer cake, such that you could use ETH, you could use lots of other tokens. You could use USDC, USDT, such that the collateral is more diverse, such that there's less risk embedded in the protocol. But very clearly, the risk is that if the value of the collateral securing the issuance of the F-assets goes below 1, then the agent may decide to keep the underlying, say the XRP, and not pay it back out to you. That is the key risk, but we have a very, very high collateral ratio. And we also immediately force agents who have provided that collateral to top up as soon as their collateral ratio goes below 2.5. And so we would require a 60% full in the space of 3 minutes. A 60% fall in the value of the collateral against the underlying, so against, say, XRP in this instance, in the space of 3 minutes, in order for that collateral ratio to be undermined below 1. And so I think there is a risk, but the return is that you get an asset which you can use on a blockchain. I think it's lower than the risk of existing bridges, centralized, multi-sig, or MPC-based bridges, which are ultimately centralized. So I think it's lower than the risk of those bridges, and you get paid in Flare for doing so.
Excellent, excellent. Now, you brought up this phrase called an agent. To those that may not be familiar with what that means, what's an agent?
Okay, so really what's happening is, if you think about the F-asset protocol, it's a synthetic protocol. So traditional synthetic protocol says you put 1.5 times the value that you want to get out into a contract. Let's say you do that in Ethereum, and now you get out, let's say you put $150 worth of Ethereum into a MakerDAO contract. And you get $100 of DAI, which is the Ethereum decentralized CDP-based stablecoin. Get $100 of that. So you're 150 in, you're 100 out. And this is very similar. And DAI has been very successful, and it hasn't, hasn't broken the peg which is why we think that we're using a 2.5x ratio on the F assets. It's safer than that, and so we think it's very unlikely to have an issue. But that's an aside. So the problem is that most people that hold XRP or Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin or whatever, they're not going to have vast amounts of Flare sitting around. So really what the F asset protocol is, it's kind of a lending protocol for that collateral. So what the agent is doing is they're essentially lending the minter collateral so that FXRP or F Bitcoin can be minted onto Flare. And the minter is paying a pretty small fee for that. So it's a dynamic market-based fee, but it's fairly low. The reason it's fairly low is because the agent can continue to earn the FTSO reward whilst having that collateral in the system. So you as a minter, you have your Bitcoin or you have your XRP, and you have an agent who holds a lot of Flare. And they put their Flare into a smart contract. Smart contract is locked. So let's say they put $2.5 million worth of Flare into a smart contract. And let's say you have $1 million worth of Bitcoin or XRP, and you want to mint that as an F asset onto Flare. So the agent has $2.5 million, you have $1 million. And what happens is you send your $1 million to the agent. Flare observes that through the state connector, and you receive $1 million worth of F Bitcoin or F XRP on Flare. And then when it comes time to redeem, you send it back to the smart contract. Smart contract tells an agent, doesn't need to be the same one, can be any agent in the system, to return you the value. Now, if they don't return you the value, then you get the value out from the agent's collateral in Flare. So let's say 20 minutes goes by and they haven't sent you your $1 million worth of XRP or Bitcoin back on the underlying network. And so the contract takes, $1 million plus 5% and gives you that as a reimbursement for the loss you've suffered. Now the agent has your Bitcoin or your XRP, and you've now got the same value of Flare, which you can use to basically cover your loss. Obviously, if the collateral that's held in the contract goes below that $1 million, you get the full amount, but it may be less than the value of the underlying.
Noted. That's very important, guys. For all of you that were asking, that he just explained it. Excellent. Now, as far as F assets are concerned, that's one of the most intriguing things for me, just because one, I'm curious, what are some potential F assets that are in line right now that may be next? And what is like your filtering or technological process that goes into bringing something on as an F asset?
There's not a vast amount of potential F assets that actually have large amounts of value. So, potential F assets are non-smart contract assets. And so I think we're pretty much at the point where we've integrated, or we are planning to integrate, most of the major non-smart contract assets. So Bitcoin, XRP, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Stellar. Algo, we will either integrate as an F asset or through Layer Cake, because Algorand does actually have smart contracts. And so I think we're pretty much complete on the sum of all the F assets.
Okay.
A community is welcome to make a governance proposal to add additional F assets, so additional non-smart contract based tokens as F assets, and there's a few that I've heard people want to integrate, such as Digibyte, and I welcome a community proposal to integrate Digibyte, but we're already integrating the vast bulk of that non-smart contract value, essentially. And then the next area is Layer Cake. Layer Cake is a bridging protocol, and we'll be building out the bridges there as we see fit. It doesn't actually require a governance proposal to add a new bridge currently. Well, we may include it in the governance proposal, but as it's only smart contracts on Flare, and it doesn't change any aspect of the protocol, and it's not, it doesn't require at the moment additional data series in the FTSO. It doesn't require governance for us to add new chains and new tokens. But where there is a need to add things to Flare, so say a new data series, that's where things like governance comes in.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Now, something I'm also very curious of is, and the reason is because of what happened to XRP, is do you foresee any possible regulatory hurdles for the Flare network down the road? I have to ask this because I didn't think XRP was going to be sued by the SEC right now. It seems like it seems like regulators are trying to overreach, if you will. And you know, I don't think you guys will. That's just my opinion, and I could be wrong.
I don't, it's impossible for me to answer that question.
I know.
I mean, look, we've been working with a US securities lawyer since day one.
Yeah.
Like, and they're on our team. They're part of Flare. And they check every tweet we make. They check every public announcement we make, such that so that our language shouldn't be construed to fit into any to be doing such a thing as to give people expectations of, you know, potentially profit in the future based on owning Flare. You know, for instance, you know, we never trying to tell people that if you buy Flare, you're going to make money, for instance. It's not something we've ever said. In fact, we've always said that if you buy Flare, then it's really incumbent upon you to get engaged in the Flare network in order to generate value together. You know, so we've taken every aspect of advice that we can. Obviously, you know, the legal areas here are unbelievably gray. And, you know, I can't say, with a certainty that there won't be regulatory issues. There can be, but that applies to absolutely every blockchain and every project in the space right now. So, you know, we've done everything we can do to make sure that we've been compliant with the regulations.
And that's the best answer, because that's the best we can do, right? It's a frustrating environment and space for you to be in at the moment, but you know, I commend you for doing your best to try and make sure things run as smoothly as possible. And
I mean, from our perspective, we've tried to stay away from the gray areas as much as possible. You know, and I'll reiterate, you know, do not buy Flare with an expectation of making profit. It's not what we're about. You know, this is a community project. The community must take part. You know, that's your, you know, we're all here to make Flare work. If you don't use the Flare protocols, well, it won't do anything.
Excellent. Now, another selfish question. In the future, is there the potential of lending on Flare?
Absolutely. That's an app. That's a DeFi app.
Excellent.
I mean, this is why DeFi, this is why, you know, having a virtual machine like the EVM, having a smart contract platform is very valuable. You know, anyone can come along and build any protocol that they want. You know, 60-70% of them will be rubbish. That's just the way this industry works. But there'll be some great stuff built as well.
Excellent. Now, something that's been used in the crypto space is an FBA network. Um, what is the process that you've taken to kind of decentralize an FBA network, and what exactly is an FBA network in layman's terms?
So Flird's not. I mean, it's a bit complex, that one. I mean,
Mhm.
we're not fully an FBA network.
Okay.
The state connector takes a lot of kind of inspiration from FBA principles,
Okay.
but then it's kind of there's a lot of fuzziness over the definition of FBA versus, say, for instance, there's a paper by Taran Chitra that shows how to convert an FBA network into a probabilistic based consensus algorithm like
Mhm.
Avalanche. And really, that's where we started. So we're kind of our own thing. Where we use the FTSO to secure the network,
Mhm. Excellent.
and that
Excellent.
uses delegation, but it's not proof of stake because it's not pure stake, because the power of each validator relies on both the stake and the success of the FTSO. So it's really its own mechanism of securing the network.
Excellent. And I do have to agree, it is a very unique thing in its own right. So that's very nice to hear. Um, I think the final thing I'll say is, because I've personally run out of questions. Hugo, is there anything that you personally would like to discuss, bring up, or anything you'd like to add to tell the community about Flare Networks
Yeah,
yourself?
I mean, I think I'd love to ask you and the people watching your video, um, what you would like to see on the network, what you're struggling with. And please don't say the distribution not happening.
Never,
Um,
never, never.
but I mean, like, where can we, how can we make it easier for you to use Flare? I know that our documentation at the moment and our tutorials are not as strong as they should be. We need to hire more people for that. We have a fantastic person called Chavi, who has been writing some of the new documents, which are extremely clear, and it's an incredibly valuable role. We need more talented document writers. We need more talented tutorial writers. How can we make our UI UX better? I'll be scanning the comments in the YouTube video. Thanks for discussion about my glasses and how I don't have any glass in the lenses. I've seen that a few times, and I also enjoy being called Harry Potter a lot. That's great. But yeah, I'd like some feedback as to how can we make this process easier for
Sure.
people to use the network.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the next hurdle is going to be, educating people to mint F-assets. We're going to be doing that on Songbird when the F-assets launch. We're going to be doing it in a restricted way, such that each address can only mint a certain amount of F-assets, because we want to make sure that the risk is limited for people, that if there's some bug in the protocol or something like that, that it doesn't cause huge losses for people. So we're going to be doing it slowly. It's not going to roll out, like, we're not going to just release the F-assets such that you can mint an unlimited amount.
Mhm.
One of the great things that the Maker DAO did was they had a minting cap on how much DAI could be created, and
Mhm.
that stopped. If you look at, say, Terra, they had this huge creation of UST, massive creation of UST. And then, of course, it obviously collapsed. It was a huge creation in a short period of time, and it was like a balloon being blown up, and it just burst. Whereas DAI has been much more successful because has much greater longevity, because they created additional amounts slowly, and that, to our mind, is a much smarter way of doing it.
Hmm. I think so. Just for people at home, that's what it's about. It's about sustainability, security and longevity. We don't want
Yeah.
any more Terra UST situations. I'm tired of this.
But I think that, really to sum it up for the community, I want to ask for feedback on how we can make it easier to use Flare. I also really want to challenge the community and say, dig into the state connector. Think about what can be built using the state connector. Can you build a swaps platform on Flare that allows you to swap Bitcoin for Ethereum secured through Flare using the state connector?
Yes.
What products can you build? I mean, yes, the answer is yes, you can, because I've thought about that for a very long time. And it's actually really simple. But we're not building it. So there's a challenge. Perhaps someone in the community can build that. And then I think one of the things I am excited by, really excited by, is a way that I think people are going to love bootstrapping the Flare development community. So you get your yield from the FTSO. And there's something that has been very successful on other networks, which one of our FTSOs is building. And I think they're calling it cloud funding. So I like that name. I'll let them announce it, but I think it's called cloud funding. So what this is a project will come to the network and they say, we want to build X, Y, Z. Let's say it's a swaps protocol. Swaps protocol that allows you to swap ETH for Bitcoin, for Solana, for whatever, all cleared through Flare. You put a little collateral on Flare. So let's say you want to swap $100 of ETH for $100 of Bitcoin. Both parties come and put $100 of Flare into the network. You make the trade, and as soon as the trade is made, you get your $100 back. If the trade isn't made, but one side makes the trade, then the other person gets the $100 back. And you lose it, but you have obviously kept your Ethereum or your Bitcoin. So that's an example of a swaps protocol. What this cloud funding protocol will do is allow users to essentially stake their tokens to a contract. Now, in that contract, as I understand it, the core principle, so you stake 100 tokens, that 100 tokens you can get back from the contract at the end of the contract. But those 100 tokens are used by the protocol. It's essentially the contract is stakes to an FTSO. And the return from the FTSO on those 100 tokens goes to the protocol. And that means that they get a way of funding their development from the inflation that comes from the FTSO. Your 100 tokens is secure, assuming they pass their audits and assuming there's nothing funny in the code, which I don't expect there to be. So, but one must caveat these things. And you get your 100 tokens back, plus say a protocol token from that protocol that's maybe building a swaps protocol. And I can tell you right now that I don't know of any protocols building a swaps protocol, so I think that would be a great protocol to build. But I think it's a great way to fund projects. It's a great way to fund projects and get upside whilst not losing principal. And I think it'll be, if executed well and with a good front end that explains the risks and of which there are not huge amounts, but there are, of course, some. For instance, the protocol may never deliver the protocol tokens contract. That is a risk. But I think it's a great way to fund projects, get involved in them, and earn their tokens.
Excellent. Hey, that's a challenge to the community right there. Hugo, thank you so much, my man. It was a pleasure to get to know you, to have all these questions answered. And I know the community's definitely on the edge of their seats. Definitely, man. Thank you so much.
So are we. And look, we're looking forward as a team to delivering this. But delivering it's just the first step. There's so many things we want to build, out into the future. Once we have this basis for Flare, there's so many exciting things that can be built by us and by others.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to everything rolling out. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, look, great to talk to you and good to meet you.
Nice
And
too.
thank you for your time.
Of course. Thank you too.